Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So today's lecture is going to be very short. I'm explaining about past encounter uh, a station. Like if you have a station, let's say, for example, we just did a station for a headache. So let's say you have a headache, right? So before you enter to the exam, obviously you have 2 minutes to prepare yourself. For that 2 minutes, you have to have a pen and a paper to get ready and write down and make a working plan that how you're going to go about this station. Obviously, you have to write down the name of the patient. If the patient is the right patient, which when you get in, you have to do ID the patient. If that's Rangina, you obviously tick mark. If the patient's date of birth is matching the age, tick mark. And also vital sign is okay. You don't have to worry. If it is not okay, you have to ask from the examiner that I need to know the vital sign, and the examiner will give you, or actually the examiner will ask you to take it yourself. So if you have, before entering to the station, if the file says these are the vital signs, then you know whether it is fine or not. If it is not mentioned, you have to ask the examiner that I need to know the vital sign of my patient. So now for the vital sign, if that's a physical examination, either the examiner will tell you that, for example, blood pressure is this, heart rate is this, respiratory rate is this, and body temperature is this, or he will just make it very simple and say everything is normal. Or he will actually ask you, those are the tools, do it yourself. Then you have to check for the blood pressure, then you have to check for the heart rate and everything and write it down. So that we take it out of the way. Now we're focusing, what do we do? If I enter to the station, what do I do? History, I have to I have to approach the patient based on the structure that I have. If it is pain, I have to have the mnemonic and I have to apply it and I have to execute it. And once the main or chief complaint is done, then I have to go after the review of the system and I have to do the red flag and I have to cover the constitutional sign and symptom, past medical history, family history, social life. Always when you do two or three summarizes, at least two. For example, when you cover this chief complaint, and when you're done with the chief complaint, review of the system, red flag, constitutional sign and symptom, then do a review, a very short summary, and then go after the past medical history, family history, sexual life, or sexual history, and then summarize, a general summarize. Now, we're talking about the past encounter. Let's say in this case, we have a 33-year-old Rangina Johuri, chief complaint is headache, and the vital signs are normal, and the history is done. Let's say that I am uh, confident. We know that we cannot 100% come up with a diagnosis based on the history taking only. We need physical examination, we need investigation, we need to do further investigation in order to come up with a, in some cases, imaging to come up with the right and final diagnosis. So based on history, we are only able to diagnose like 60 to 70%. So let's say, for the sake of this lecture, that I am confident enough to call it migraine. Remember when for the past encounter, when the examiner asks you, what is your diagnosis at this point? At this point, my diagnosis migraine. But when you say that this is my diagnosis, you have to justify it. Don't just say it is migraine. That's it. No, you have to justify it why it is migraine. Based on the history I took, the patient has headache, which is unilateral on the right side. She has had it for a while, and the characteristic of the pain is tubing. The pain gets worse when my patient is exposed to the light and noisy environment, and the patient gets better when the patient rests or goes in a quiet room. So this is justifying that my patient has migraine rather than something very serious. And it is gradual. She has been suffering from this condition for a while, and I am confident enough to say that this is migraine. See, when you call your diagnosis, you have to have a justification. You can't just call it migraine. You can't just call it cluster headache. You can't just call it anything without any justification. You have to have a proof. You have to have a justification that that is my reason based on the history that I took. There might be another question. What is your differential diagnosis? There is a rule for differential diagnosis. Remember, if they're asking you about the differential diagnosis, you have to choose five maximum, five condition maximum, three condition minimum. I would encourage you to stick with three because you have to be aware of your time management, because the more differential diagnosis you have, the more justification, the more reasons you have to provide for each and every single one of them, right? So the less you have, the less justification you need to provide. So first of all, we have to know that if they're asking me for a differential diagnosis, I can provide them with three differential diagnoses or five maximum. I cannot just give him a list of 13 conditions. Just maximum is five, minimum is three. I would stick with three. So my differential diagnosis is the first and most important one is migraine. Always put your diagnose in the first differential diagnose. Never ever put your differential diagnose uh, the wrong way. For example, if it is your diagnosis to if migraine is your diagnosis and you say tension, cluster, and migraine, don't put your actual diagnosis at the end. Put it number one. Okay, always put your diagnosis as a number one differential diagnosis. My differential diagnosis is number one, migraine, based on these justification that I just explained it. Now, my second differential diagnosis is cluster headache. Why? Because also in cluster headache, we have one side, we can have one side headache, but the reason I put it as a second, because the patient has tearing rather than throbbing pain. And also the patient is getting better by activity as opposed to migraine, which gets worse. So these are the things that I have to explain and justify that these are the reason that I've considered as a second. Or as a third, I put my tension headache and I have to explain it why I put it as a third one. So remember, for the differential diagnosis, when you're providing differential diagnosis, you can't just name them. You have to justify for every single one of them, the same way that you did it for the diagnosis. Thank you very much.